The new scarlet letter. Single mother. I must have ordered that one along my journey. I visualized having one good ovum left, getting artificially inseminated, and taking care of my child myself. I had wealth and intended to multiply it. Several mistakes later, it didn't work out that way. Have you ever made so many mistakes that you wonder if you ever knew how to do life correctly? There are groups on social media created with the sole mandate to hate single moms. We're called everything under and above the sun. We are judged by people whose lives are in perfect alignment with the divine plan and in immaculate order. Those blessed souls who have lived our stories and have thrived. We thank them for their sacrifice. What you give attention to will manifest in your life. The feeling will multiply. What they do not understand is that somewhere in their family line, there will be a single parent, because whatever you give your energy to is an order placed in the unseen. Choose wisely. Unhealed trauma at the time had me thinking I was unloved and unlovable. I have made more mistakes than I ever thought I could. I surprised myself. I believed that my dad had abandoned me, but he simply did not have the tools to be an amazing father at the time. Later, I found these feelings of abandonment to be a paradigm which was snaking its way down the family line. Dad left, the rape, and then came the move to a relative's house. I told myself that it meant having to deal with nothing being mine. Not my parents, not my bed, not my toys, not my siblings. The highs were sublime and the lows were debilitating. The cute, smart little girl who loved books grew into a hurting teenager with secrets for healing. The cost of that belief was that I ran through the list of girl with no daddy issues with a sprint. And since I'm thorough, I'm sure that I covered everything. I attracted what I was and threw away safety and love from my former husband. I judged and hated my mom for giving me up. I had decided that her decision made her a bad mother and indeed a horrible human being. The truth was more intricately woven than I could have imagined. There was so much that I did not know. I understand now how difficult it must have been for her to do what she thought was best for me. She paid the lofty price of my calculated absence. My tab was not having her guidance and making mistakes that taxed all areas of my life. Since you become what you judge because you give so much energy to it, I became a single mom with children having to grow up too fast. I have forgiven my parents for their perceived slights, and I have forgiven myself too. My focus now is raising my standard, not to its former height, but to the highest height of progression, to the best for myself and to my children. This is the least I will ever be. My children were given to me to steward. I focus on doing a better job each day and all day long. I apologize to them often and go into silence when my emotions are tasked. I'm mindful of my tone. I'm sharing with them the lessons that I needed for life. If you have the capacity to help a single mom, please do so. If you're the type of human who expects anything in return for assisting anyone, please do not help. A thank you should suffice for your act or acts of kindness. How may I serve you is the correct way to ask. Help only in the way requested. Refrain from doing what you think is best in another's life if you were not given the blueprint for their existence. Once you have offered to help, be open to not being taken up on the offer. Not all offers to serve are good. They may be kind gestures, but not necessarily good. Even pedophiles offer to assist with nefarious agendas. Before I was a mom, I was a service-led single who helped single moms because my mom was one, in the following ways. I still do what I can for single moms with the intention of doing immeasurably more. You may come up with your own list. Offer to be a mentor for specific things, for example, children's gifting and life skills. Purchase monthly passes for parents and or children. Purchase grocery gift cards. Babysit so mom may have a self-care day. Connect mom with programs and services. Pay for programs such as sports. Pay for mom and or children's educational needs. Offer rides. Offer free services, for example, counseling, housekeeping. Support single mom-owned businesses. I thank you for your service to single moms globally. Thank you for your service to their children and by extension, the future.
My heading is art. Art is such an interesting subject. It brings you not only in human life, but animal, birds, rivers, bridges, roads, trees, buildings, environments, towns, countries, etc., etc. Art keeps you alert. It is so interesting. I'm not going to go further. The subject is so vast. There's so much to say. In short, I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Let me begin by saying that the story of my life began in Guyana, where I grew up and became an elementary school teacher. Part 2 involves traveling to England to study nursing. Part 3 started in February of 1973 when I joined my husband in Toronto. The focus of the story speaks to my life in Peterborough, Ontario, where I truly lived a minority in a small conservative community. In May of 1984, I had just graduated from Teachers College at the University of Toronto. It was time to look for a non-bedside nursing job. The advertisement for a nursing instructor was in the Globe and Mail, and with no hesitation and bags of naivety, I applied. I had 11 years plus of nursing experience in Toronto and in England. It never occurred to me that being a Black woman could prevent me from being the successful candidate. I survived pervasive anti-Black racism in England. This is Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen. In addition, I was a 38-year-old, fearless, brazenly confident, and self-assured woman who knew that racism existed. But thus far, it had never stopped me from accomplishing my career goals. I got the job. When I realized that commuting was not a viable option, we decided to move to Peterborough. It did not take long for our family units to settle into school, church, and work. We made friends and lived a balanced life in our community. There were racial issues at the children's school and during sports. But because both my partner and I were assertive and kept our fingers on the pulse of what was going on, we were able to offer our children a stress reduced life in Peterborough. When we moved to Peterborough, there were about 50 other families of African Caribbean heritage in this 67,000 population. This means that we were visible. It did not take us long to connect with the other families, to form a community within a community. We spent time together and encouraged our children to become friends. Students in my classes at the college were all white. Most hailed from the small communities around Peterborough. As would be expected, they were surprised to see a faculty member of my hue at the front of the class. Most were shocked that my English was understandable. For them, I was an anomaly with expertise and knowledge that they needed if they were going to be successful in their profession. They came to the realization that they needed what I had to offer. With that in mind, they did not openly reject or refuse to have me teach them. When I came to my colleagues, I must have been the first woman of color that most of them had ever interacted with this closely. Most were polite, but not helpful in any way. Several were threatened by my experience and my credentials. I was a qualified teacher plus a nurse. All of them were just experienced nurses. I cannot say that anyone was brash or bold enough to display their racism, but it was there in subtle ways. I was often asked about my hairstyles and how long it took to get my hair done, how did I wash my hair, and so on and so forth. People wanted to touch my hair. I was left out of many social discussions, but I grew used to it. I smiled when one colleague told me that she was shocked that the students were so accepting of me. According to her, students always gave new teachers a challenging time. During my 10 plus years of working as a nursing faculty in Peterborough, I immersed myself in the position. I kept current and gave the position my best. I became one of the most respected members of the team and coordinated the second-year nursing program. When the local university was ready to collaborate with Fleming College for their joint nursing program, I volunteered. That means that I am the co-author of the nursing program between Trent University and Fleming College in Peterborough. During my tenure at the college, I formed a group that was responsible for curating a Black History event at the public library. It was the first for Peterborough, and dare I say it was hugely successful. The entrepreneurial bug was beginning to tug at my heartstrings. It was time for me to build my own ladder and not climb the proverbial corporate ladder. With that in mind, my partner and I reflected and deliberated. We then decided it was the right time to follow in my mother's footsteps because she was an entrepreneur. She was always self-employed. We returned to Toronto and opened Burke's Bookstore in 1995.
Story about me. I really do believe that if I give something to someone, they will eventually give something back, be it to myself or someone else. Hence, I started giving my energy and time to the community through organizing events and programs to celebrate culture diversity and teach about culture and courage to young children, especially young girls. Therefore, my journey in Canada began from a researcher to be a teacher to a cultural organizer and to be a woman advocate, and finally leading to be an equity leader, which is still continued. Coming from India, I bring a cultural connection to our indigenous land acknowledgement as we celebrate and design Rangoli in and out of our homes to create respect, purity, and protection, very similar to indigenous land acknowledgement, which also brings respect and protection to our land where we reside. I have been in situations in the past where it didn't feel okay to be myself or to have a voice, and I always found it more difficult to excel in those situations. It didn't feel okay as I was held back or missed out on opportunities because of my race, gender, overqualification, education. And in these situations, I try to challenge these behaviors as I started feel and recognize it with a responsibility to call it out. I further realized that I will need to fight for things I care about and will need to stay strong and positive through this journey of my identity as an organizer, and involved myself in many organizational involvements. This particular event became a memorable as we celebrated Diwali and Indian flag hosting at the same time when we were celebrating 150th anniversary of Canada. In this slide, I focused my energy to be a role model for my daughter as I tell my daughter to have her voice in the world. I continue to build a strong womanhood with more events of cultural storytelling and role modeling. In this particular event, I created a history as for the first time I was able to invite a director of HWDSB, many figurative, in a racial youth cultural event on behalf of India-Canada Society. By this time, as a teacher of HWDSB, I brought my cultural knowledge to schools to create diversity club to provide safe spaces for all marginalized students and to bring inclusiveness through equity. Through this journey of being racial woman equity leadership role, I became a presenter to many to create awareness about anti-racism and anti-Black racism in Hamilton education community. I also became the first racial woman advocate and an anti-harassment officer of Hamilton School Board. Through Women of Courage workshop, I was able to make connection with many more courageous racial women and unlearned my own strengths. This helped me to create a poetic love letter and a personal short story, as it is called Tree of Life. There is no insurance for love. It takes awareness to keep it alive. My story is still continued, and it is not over because this journey is never ending. I am representing myself as macaw, mimicking positive emotions and strong flighty wings, welcoming new and all challenges. Thank you.
I titled my story The Cost of Hope because what I want to resonate is that I am still hopeful. And I'd like to begin my story with a poem by Rupi Kaur. It's called Immigrant. They have no idea what it's like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again, to have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries. I come from the land of gold, fabric, and fufu. That is the home that I left and lost and left. A home filled with vibrant colors, whether in the form of gold, fabric, or personalities. A home that feeds the stranger in belly and in benevolence. Ask anyone who knows a Ghanaian. They will tell you that we are a hospitable and friendly folk who never turn anyone away. We are welcoming to all. We take our national religion seriously in applying Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Today, I live in the land of oppression and opportunity. The oppression comes in overt and covert ways, whether it be microaggressions, gaslighting, or differential treatment. It's always there, just beneath the surface of most interactions. The oppression is in a colleague asking if I can read. It is in being told that I'm too sensitive and not wanting to have my hair or skin petted. And it is also being called angry or loud, where others are said to be passionate and enthusiastic. I have not been able to leave the oppression behind as I left my home behind. They say that hope springs eternal. Hope may spring eternal, but hope also springs pain when a person's hopes are dashed against the rocks like a wild and angry ocean. Despite my negative experiences, it is my desire that as hope springs eternal, it will also spring healing. In order to understand why, in the words of Rupi Kaur, I feel as if I may never find home again, it must be understood why home had to be left in the first place. When a country is raped and pillaged, there are repercussions that carry on from generation to generation. The extraction of a country's resources in the form of gold, diamonds, and even manpower is what leads to intergenerational poverty. In the words of F.W. Hirsch, colonists who extracted wealth of a country continue to be intergenerationally wealthy. Those from whom it was extracted continue to be intergenerationally poor. The ripple effect of colonialism sometimes makes a home dangerous for certain individuals, who must then leave that home in search of opportunities elsewhere. I was one such individual. And although I was so young and I don't remember the details, I do remember the fear of the departure and the rush of excitement at the arrival. Arriving in a new country is usually done with the mentality that this new country will become a new home, whether temporarily or permanently. The search for a new home is usually done with optimism and about the opportunities that await. Those opportunities do exist, but so does oppression. Home is where you are accepted, welcomed, and loved. In losing one home, I was uncertain about whether or not I would ever be home again. The dichotomy of the opposing forces of oppression and opportunity has drawn a line that at times becomes blurred. What is the land of opportunity? Which is the land of opportunity and which is the land of oppression? In my birthland exists the opportunity to find myself and to be myself, to be all of myself. But being fully myself means being half Canadian. Some of my mannerisms and thought processes are fully Canadian. My physicality and my belief systems are fully Guinean. This means that I am forever in flux. Both homes are part of me, and I therefore celebrate both parts of my life as best as I can. This means that I call those who are of my culture and older than me aunties or uncles, whether or not there is a blood relation. If I really want to be respectful, and if it suits the close nature of our relationship, I will call them ma or mother. It also means that I no longer hide my fabrics away solely for cultural events, but I incorporate it into my work attire. Amalgamating both cultures means that all major events, such as weddings and funerals, integrate both cultures. We have cultural weddings that begin with our door knocking and bride price, and these weddings end in church ceremonies. We have funerals that begin with traditional funeral parlor service and ends with a cultural celebration of life. All are part and parcel of who I am, and I wish to extract none of it. I am unapologetically myself, a Guinean, but also a Canadian. Like a child represents the best parts of her parents, so do I represent the best parts of both of my countries. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carmen Gao. I'm from Markham, Ontario. The topic of my story is a Chinese mom's unconditional love for her gay son. My husband Robin and I immigrated to Canada in 1999. Within 2 years and a half, we had a daughter and a son. In 2003, we returned to Beijing. 12 years later, in 2015, our whole family moved back to Toronto. My son Kingsley went through a very difficult time after he returned to Toronto at the age of 13. He was tortured by severe headache and couldn't attend school. We didn't realize that he was suffering depression until he became suicidal. June 25th, 2017. It was a sunny and hot day. My 15-year-old boy, Kingsley, asked me to drive him to downtown Toronto. Right after we stood in front of the world-famous Toronto Pride Parade, all of a sudden he said, "Mom, I'm gay." I was shocked and frozen. As a Chinese mother, although I had done some research on LGBTQ+, when my own son spoke out the 4 words, "Mom, I'm gay," I was totally lost and didn't know what to say. Time flew by. When I saw the crowd was so joyful, free, and most importantly blessed, I turned to my son and said, "No matter who you are always my son. I love you, but I care about your health and safety." Hand in hands, we joined the thousands of people to celebrate the diversity and the freedom we have. And from that moment, I understood what unconditional love meant. My son Kingsley is a very caring and a sensitive boy. Although he officially came out that day, he hesitated to acknowledge his dad, Robin, who had suspicion on Kingsley's sexual orientation. I kept this secret to myself for over 1.5 years. I felt very sorry about Kingsley because without Dad's acceptance and support, he was not fully blessed. One day, I encouraged Robin and Kingsley to have an honest talk. That was a very good one. Robin showed his understanding, although he still had stigma, and even wished this was all a dream. According to the current statistics, we can no longer ignore the fact that people with diverse sexual orientation exist in all communities with similar proportion. However, stigma, discrimination, and violence against LGBTQ+ community never disappear and are hurting our children every day. Mom, if I tell you I'm gay, will you still love me? Will you always love me? After I knew why Kingsley suffered a headache and was suicidal, I felt that I should not only embrace and support my son, but also have the courage to do more for a healthier and a safer environment for the LGBTQ+ community. In November of 2019, I initiated and hosted a seminar with the theme of Rainbow Flag in Canada. The 4-hour event was blended with speeches, personal experience sharing, and presentations from ACAS, HSBC, York Region Police, the MP of Richmond Hill, a psychiatrist, and the Chinese gay couple who have happily lived together for 20 years, and my introduction to PFLAG, an organization that brings together families and friends of LGBTQ+ people. Over 50 people from Mandarin-speaking community attended this event. Many of them told the Chinese media that they were so touched and motivated to embrace and support LGBTQ+ community. Kingsley, who volunteered at the event, told me afterwards, "Mom, I'm so impressed." Now, Kingsley is enjoying his second year learning drama at New York University. Many people said, Kingsley is so lucky to have family support. I'm proud that my son can be the one he wants to be. On June 26, 2022, Robin dropped me to go to the first in-person Toronto Pride Parade after the pandemic. Singing, dancing, and laughing with hundreds of thousands of people, we called Kingsley, who was then attending the Pride Parade in New York City. When I saw Dad and the son smiling and waving at each other, tears fell down, and I knew they were the tears of happiness. During my 5-year journey of supporting my gay son, I know how powerful the unconditional love could be. With that, we can protect our children and make a better world. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kiden, and I was born in Sudan. South Sudan became a country in 2011. Actually, right now, I am an author, I am an activist, and I'm also a speaker. So, my story started in Sudan, where one morning I was having a baby, giving birth, my first baby. 2 hours into the birth, bombs were dropped in Juba town. I panicked. I was terrified. Fortunately, my mother was around, and she came collectively and very calm and picked the baby, and we ran for safety. We hid in the bushes for hours. When we came out of the bushes, my husband, Duku, said, "No, no, no. We cannot live here. We need to leave this country." So we left. In 2 months, with a 2-month-old baby, I was 20 years old. Where did we go? To Uganda. In Uganda, we were foreigners. We didn't know the language. We didn't have a job. There was no income. With the little savings we had, Duku decided to open a beauty product business in Kampala. I worked with him full time. But guess what? I was wearing slippers at home, at work, and every day I was in slippers. One rainy season, the city got muddy, and it was wet. As I walked in the muddy path of Kampala, suddenly my slippers broke. And I had to tie them with a string every time the ties came off. I thought to myself, what can I do? I didn't know what to do. Then I stood one day by the street to tie my muddy, broken slippers. As I stood there, tears ran down my face. I felt sad. I was embarrassed. I came home and I said to Duko, "Give me money." He said, "No." I said, "Yes." And I took money from the hip sack and I bought a new pair of shoes. The first day I wore those shoes, I felt secure. My feet was comfortable. I spoke, I stood up, and I walked in those shoes with confidence. Thank you.
I am Dr. Meenakshi Das. My organization name is Toronto Training and Research. I work as a voice for immigrants based in Canada and working for their rights, social justice, and economic well-being as the immigrants are struggling life in Canada to get some jobs and also even though they are skilled, but their skills are not recognized. So how the immigration policy can facilitate the immigrants of Canada to integrate and as well as having economic well-being and health and well-being. So I would like to work further on their on these directions. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Rabia. I am an immigrant from Afghanistan. I came to Canada in 2002. I don't know people did Halloween until 5 years. After 5 years, my daughter started going to school. Her teacher gave her a big bag of candy, and my daughter's friends asked her few. My daughter friends asked her if we were doing a Halloween party. My daughter didn't know that what Halloween was. When we didn't understand what they wanted to come over to our house for ticket reading. About they show up they show up until 7 p.m. at a knock on the door. I saw some kids dressed up with colored faces and large hats. When I went to get the door, I got very scared. So I closed the door on them and called my husband. He came to me and asked me what happened. And I told him there were some people at the door. He asked if I know them. And I said, I don't. When he opened the door, the kids told him Happy Halloween. My husband told me to go get candy for them, but I was confused. And I asked him why. He said he saw the news about how Canada had a holiday called Halloween. I realized that was similar to a holiday I celebrated back home called Ramadan, where they sing song and give candy to children. After that, kids from the elementary school would come to get Halloween candy from me every year. Now, now kids are going less, and it seems Halloween is not being celebrated as much more. Everyone know what Halloween means, but only my daughter wanted to celebrate this year. Thank you for listening to my story.
December 10th, 2022, she'd have been 50 years old. On July 4th, 2010, my whole world stopped. It seems as though the world stopped spinning and ceased to exist, because that day marked the beginning of a painful, long journey of a chapter in my life that was unnecessary and unwanted. Yes, it was on July 4th, 2010. My beautiful and magnificent daughter we brought into this world was undeservingly taken away from us. It was sudden. It was devastating. It was hard. It was scary. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts really bad. She died of a rare life-threatening heart disease diagnosed as Brugada syndrome. Symptoms often start during adulthood, but the disorder can develop at any age. The average age of death related to this disease is 40 years old. My daughter died at 37 years old. She was traveling by bus on her way to New York for the Canada Day weekend holiday and just collapsed at the Port Authority bus terminal. I was lying in my bed a little later than usual that morning. I was thinking and preparing myself of all the things I had planned for the whole weekend celebration. I received a phone call. That is the kind of call that every parent dreads. I dropped the phone. My screams made the family members of the home come running down the stairs, and my neighbors ran over to see what was happening. I could not contain myself. I couldn't even comprehend what was happening or what I was hearing. All I can think is that I should be there with her, but I was home in Toronto. Her father flew to New York on the next available flight the same day to be by her daughter's side at the hospital. Several days, two of her brothers and her two children, along with a family friend and myself, drove to New York in a rented van. I've made many trips several times to New York, and it was always exciting to admire the beautiful sceneries and landscape. However, this journey was painful. The ride was dreary and seemed longer. The air was gushing in my face, making me believe I was in the middle of a storm. The air flowing also gave me the chills, tensing me up more inside and make me unable to move. I felt trapped. We arrived 9 hours later, and we were greeted by hospital staff who escorted us up to the floor. At first, the walk made us felt like we were VIPs. But as we continued to walk to the room, it became dreadful and frightening. I felt as though I was walking to my death. Oh, what a feeling. All I can hear were the awful sounds of those life support machines. We finally arrived at her room. We arrived all at her bedside, just watching the mechanical rise and fall of her chest that kept time with the ventilator's hissing sound. My heart skipped a beat again, and I remember just rushing out of the room, crying my heart out. Her head was bent to the side, with a tail that kept holding the tubes in her mouth. I guess she too was in deep shock. I looked at my daughter. Her skin was just swollen, but looked soothing, rubbery, but healthy. She lay there like an African queen. Her nails were well manicured in a fiery red polish. Her face was glowing with beauty and all the love that surrounded her. We all took turns speaking in her ears. During the course of the evening and late into the night, we sat with her, prayed, and truly hoped and wished she heard us. I read a letter I wrote to her. Dear Omiana, my daughter, I want you to know all these years I'm still preoccupied with memories of you. You are not just my daughter, but my best friend too. I still remember how we used to huddle up in your granny, my mother's room, every night to watch her favorite TV show. You will always remain my unique and special only daughter. You are a woman with high morals, integrity, and style. You made me proud in so many ways. Your acts of compassion, like buying breakfast for people on the streets, made my heart burst with pride. The work you did with seniors, the way you took care of your family, friends, and 2 children, and the good manners you used around other people was admirable. You have grown to become a strong and independent woman. Your passing broke me into 1,000 pieces, but because of you, I've learned that that life is a gift, no matter how hard it is, and that I have the choice to choose. My daughter, I could only understand how you felt when you collapsed at Port Authority. I'm so sorry I was not there to touch you, to feel you, to hold you in my arms to comfort you, and to tell you how much you are loved. I hope you forgive me for this. We know you still live because we were able to donate 5 of your organs. I will always cherish the happy moments. I will miss receiving the full arrangement for my special occasions. Since July 2010, not one day has gone by and you have not risen in my thought. Losing you, especially my only girl, is something I will never ever get over. It was the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. I look forward to the day when I will get to see you and hold you again. The joyful moments we spent together, the love you share with me will always live on and always be part of me. You are loved. We love you dearly. Mommy. Finish.
What Canada means to me. The first thing that comes to mind is the poem titled The Loon by a Sudbury poet whose name I forget. He tells the story of a loon diving deep into one of the numerous Northern Ontario lakes, and all that the loon encounters and feels on its way down in this aquatic environment. That poem has always epitomized my experience of Canada because I spent many, many days watching loons dive and frolic on many Canadian lakes. From Candle Lake in Saskatchewan, Ramsey Lake, Long Lake, McFarlane Lake, Memquisette, Nipissing Lake, Lake Wanapitei, Lake Huron, and Lake Nipissing in Northern Ontario, to Rice Lake and Lake Ontario, Lake Erie in Southern Ontario. Next is the food that is authentically Canadian, at least to me, and that is fiddleheads. I remember a friend taking me to harvest fiddleheads on the family's lakefront property when I first arrived in Northern Ontario, and showing me how to cook them. In my curiosity to learn how fiddleheads got into the Canadian diet, I learned about the diet of the Indigenous people of Northern Ontario. That led to my first visit to Manitoulin Island, where I had the privilege of speaking with members of the Indigenous community and watching some of their traditional celebrations, including powwows. My interactions with the Indigenous people of Northern Ontario and my visit to the Indigenous tourist sites of Vancouver and Victoria in British Columbia dispelled the negative images I had been fed about Indigenous peoples in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, upon my arrival in Canada in the early 1980s. I can only hope that change has taken place in the last 40 years. This got me thinking of race relations in Canada, which culminated in my visit to Dresden in Amherstburg to visit Uncle Tom's cabin and learn about Canada's role in the transatlantic slave trade, the Underground Railroad, the freeing of slaves, and the abolition of slavery. All these experiences would not have been possible without the people. Canadians are the most diverse, the most generous, and the most fascinating people. I once stayed with a Canadian family of Asian descent in Vancouver who introduced me to the tasty delight of Peking duck and egg drop soup. I haven't tasted any as delicious since. I learned to eat and love pierogies from my friend of Ukrainian descent in Saskatoon, a culinary love that saw me visiting the Ukrainian Old People's Home in Sudbury many Sundays to purchase homemade pierogies and cabbage rolls. The Huguenots were always friendly and patiently answered my many questions when I encountered them in the farmers' markets in Saskatoon, as were the Mennonites in Ontario. The French Canadians in Northern Ontario, from Sudbury all the way to Kapuskasing, introduced me to tortilla and tried to teach me French. They were unsuccessful with me, but they succeeded with my children. I attended a bar mitzvah, and I was invited to dance at a friend's daughter's bat mitzvah in Sudbury. My Italian-Canadian friends have fed me all shapes and sizes of pasta, brodo, and espresso. My Irish-Canadian friends have tried to pass on their love of potatoes. My Polish-Canadian friends, their love of cured meat, cold cuts, brioche, and pickled cucumbers. My British-Canadian friends, their love of the English language, pot pies, beef Wellington, and all things Jane Austen. And my Russian-Canadian and German-Canadian friends have tried but failed to get me to like vodka. I have learned much from my American-Canadian friends, as I have from my Caribbean-Canadian and South American-Canadian friends. Caribana will not be possible without this group of friends. I have learned perseverance and stoicism from my African-Canadian friends. There are so many wonderful creatures and vistas under the waters surrounding the loon as it dives mainly for food. The loon must know when to surface for air to live to see another day. Too long a dive could see the loon struggling and surfacing just in time. That is my story. I surfaced just in time to take a huge breath and continue with life.